The question's been popped, and so has the bubbly, and you're probably in a state of newly engaged bliss at the moment. But once that is settled, you'll start to realise that you've actually got to save some money for this wedding. And that can be quite stressful, whether you're used to saving and quite good with money, or you've got absolutely no clue. So, for this session, I am delighted to be joined by Katie Watts from MoneySavingExpert.com, aka the absolute number one place on the internet to go for any kind of money saving advice, to kind of give a bit of guidance as to how to kind of decide on your budget and sort out your finances when you're planning your wedding. Thanks very much for joining me today, Katie.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. I mean, it's a funny old world, and I've just finished replanning my wedding for the second time. So I promise any brides and grooms out there who are feeling the strain and the stress of having to do all the admin again, I'm totally with you.
It is such a stressful time for people planning their weddings and for people in the industry just now. It's just been a nightmare with these restrictions changing all the time. And there's a lot of admin involved with wedding planning anyway, even during regular times that I think people aren't quite aware of. Um, and I wanted to pick your brains about what people should tackle first when it comes to actually budgeting for their wedding. Like, how do you actually go about deciding what you should budget for your wedding?
Well, too many people, frankly, start with this is the dream wedding I want now. How am I going to afford to pay for it? And actually, you should flip it the other way round. It should be this is what I can afford to spend or to save into the run up for the big day. And then what is the best day that I can have on that amount of money? At the end of the day, debt is one of the biggest causes of divorce in this country. So let's not start the marriage off on the wrong foot.
That's very, very good advice. And another thing that a lot of couples are finding nowadays is that whereas previously it would be the bride's parents rather, that would pay for the wedding or pay for a big chunk of the wedding, people aren't kind of getting those parental contributions to the same degree nowadays. Like everyone wants to self-fund their wedding because that gives you kind of more control over your plans, basically. And people just aren't so traditional now. So for a lot of people, this is maybe one of the biggest things they've ever had to save up for. They've maybe, they've maybe not got a house yet, and they're not in the habit of making savings. And I just wondered what your advice would be to anyone who's totally new to saving money. Like, have you got any beginners tips on how to actually go about doing that?
Wow, that at Money Saving Expert, that's our bread and butter. So hopefully today I can give you a few places to start. But first of all, I just want to say that a wedding is just one day, and that if the coronavirus pandemic has taught us anything, it's that we really have been taking for granted all the other parts of life that normally go on, and the times we get to meet our friends and go out and go to restaurants. And I think it's worth considering, is the big day, the one big day, really worth missing out on all those dinners and all those times that you get to spend with your friends where you're making memories and with your family? So let's think really carefully about how important that one single day and the photos and the videos you get left behind with really are. When you talk about budgeting, one of the best ways to save, if you're in a position to save, is to put that away on payday. So put the set amount that you plan to put away in a separate pot in an easy access savings account if you need to get to it to spend money on the wedding along the way. Or if you are waiting a little bit longer, you can lock it away for a year or 2 years, and that will get you a slightly better rate. But once it's gone, it kind of feels like it's not your money to spend anymore. So that really helps with saving. It's so simple, but it really works. I think one of the other things that's really important to do is make sure you're not paying more for anything than you really need to. So mainly that's bills. You could be saving hundreds of pounds if you sit down just one Saturday and go through all your bills and switch and save. So you could switch your energy provider. That could save you about 250 to 300 pounds at the moment. If you're on a standard deal and you switch to a fixed rate, you can make sure that your savings are working harder for you, so you get the best account for that. If it's time for you to remortgage, make sure you're remortgaging to a great rate. Rates are really low at the moment, so you could be getting quite a cheap mortgage. And if you're not planning on moving, sign up for longer, because then it will protect you in case rates go up again. Make sure that you're switching your mobile phone provider and just changing to a cheaper SIM if you need to. Your broadband, do you really need TV, Sky, for example, or can you live with Freeview? Make those sort of cutbacks without actually cutting back. Are these things that you're actually using? Can you save money on them if you are? And that really is the best way to kind of leave yourself with a bit more disposable income. But then I have one more nifty trick for you with the things that you are finding it tougher to get rid of. And that is called demotivation. And the way this works is you take something that's a regular spend that you do a lot of the time and you compare it to how much you earn. And that kind of helps you to cut the habit. So that might be cigarettes, for example, or a chocolate, or the weekly magazine subscription that you get. And if you add it up over an amount of time and then compare it with how long it would need you to work to pay for that over a year, you might find that it really puts you off buying it again. So, for example, before we were all in lockdown, I had a daily coffee Monday to Friday that was about £3. I live in London, so it's quite expensive down here. And I added that up over the course of a year, and it would have taken me about 2.5 weeks to earn that back. So that really stopped me going for it. And I started bringing in my own coffee after that. And those sort of little budgeting hacks are ways to really make it kind of fun, or give you a bit of motivation to do it.
Yeah, that's amazing advice, and advice that I've followed. Actually, weirdly, it's funny you said to take a Saturday to spend some time seeing what bills you can cut, because I actually have spent some time doing that today, and it was as simple as phoning my broadband provider and saying to them, look, loads of my friends are on much better deals with other providers. Like, what can you do for me? And they slashed my rate immediately without grilling me. And I think a lot of people, they're maybe too scared to ask because they think, oh, like, why are they going to do me a favour? But a lot of them want to keep your custom, so they're going to like make a little cut for you if it means retaining you.
The
So yeah,
trick for haggling is to do it with charm, first of all, and second, to benchmark it. So go and do a search and figure out how cheap you could be getting it. This works for like car insurance really well, for example, or breakdown cover, broadband bills as well. They're some of the easiest companies to haggle with. And you say, I've seen this rate, this is the tariff that I've seen, and it's going to cost me this much. So can you do better, or I'm going to switch? And they may be able to say, you know, we can help you, or we can't.
So one thing that our generation benefits from is technology and money saving apps, and all the kind of benefits that come with those. And I just wondered, are there any kind of apps or any pieces of tech that you recommend for money saving that you've found useful?
So actually, a lot of the traditional banks, if you've got a normal bank account with those, have kind of caught up to some of the app-based banking, and they've done things that the techier companies have done before. So, for example, rounding up your spends and putting it in a little cash pot. Now, a lot of traditional banks will do that as well. And actually, traditional banks will give you better rates for your money as well for your imbalance credit. So sometimes these app-based banks are better for things like if you spend lots of money abroad, or if you want a certain perk that they can offer. But there is one thing that these app-based banks do, which is really helpful, which is some of them have pots of money. And for me, that was a really useful impetus for saving for my wedding. I had a few different pots for things that I wanted to definitely save myself, and not with my partner, but for me. So for example, my wedding dress. And so I had a special pot for the wedding dress and accessories and hair and makeup, and I knew roughly how much I needed. I set the target and I put money aside every month into each of those pots. And it was just a little sort of motivation for me. So I really recommend doing that if you have got an app-based bank like Monzo or Starling already. There are some other ways to sort of save money with apps. If you're with a mobile phone provider like Vodafone, for example, or O2, sign up for their priority rewards services. So they give you lots of cheap deals and offers and free sandwiches and all sorts of things in their apps, and they kind of get updated all the time. So it's worth keeping an eye out for great offers on there. We rate them quite a lot. So you get free things or cheap things or really good discounts that are better than what you can get elsewhere on the market. And then I think another app that I'd like to highlight is something called Too Good To Go. Too Good To Go takes sort of leftover food stock at the end of the day in sort of popular restaurants or chains or even local eateries, and it sells them off a lot cheaper. So you can go and pick them up. You basically just book what's there about sort of late evening, and then you go and get them, and you've got a really cheap meal for the evening. And it's a really great way to cut food waste, save money, and sort of help the business as well.
Yeah, that's such a great thing to do, especially yeah for restaurants and things that are struggling a little bit. You know, we should be doing what we can to support them, and that's a really great way to do it. So let's talk about deposits because that's something that I think people don't really bear in mind when they're first setting a budget for their wedding. You might not realise that when you book a supplier, it's not just a case of emailing them and they're going to secure the date. You need to pay them a deposit in many circumstances, whether that's for your dress or for your venue or for your photographer, to secure that date. So is there a kind of percentage of your overall wedding budget that you think a couple should kind of have good to go when they start planning a wedding? I know it's quite a difficult one, but even like a rough percentage to have in mind.
Well, from experience, I would go for about a quarter. Things like DJs and florists and so on don't really need massive deposits. In some cases, it can be as low as 50 quid, or just a couple of £100. But things like the venue that you're hiring, and particularly the caterer, are some of your biggest expenses, and they have quite big upfront budgets. So they will be looking probably for about a quarter, and then they'll do you a payment plan along the way. And actually, some of the providers now are also looking for a sort of interim COVID-19 payment, which will sort of aim to keep the venue going as sort of a middle payment that wasn't there before. They've just shuffled up some of it to keep the venue going so you can have your big day there eventually, and the business is kind of stable for a time. So you've also got that to bear in mind at the moment as well. But yeah, I think a quarter is probably a good start, and that will make you feel nice and comfortable, and you can get everything lined up and then save up to pay the rest of the instalments.
And speaking of COVID, obviously, lots of people, including yourself, have had to change plans multiple times because of the restrictions changing all the time. And wedding insurance has been quite a hot topic, and people have been saying, you know, this is why you need it. Is it difficult to get wedding insurance right now? And does it even really cover you in circumstances such as this?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's really hard to get wedding insurance right now. A lot of them have withdrawn from the market while they look after their other insurance customers. So, for example, some of them might be underwritten by another provider that does travel insurance. So they're looking after lots of other more pressing insurance products. And even if you got the wedding insurance before the pandemic started, it doesn't actually cover this kind of eventuality in lots of cases. Wedding insurance is designed to cover things like if a supplier goes bust, so that might count, or if the rings get stolen or lost, or if there's a flood that prevents you having your venue on the day that you needed to, or if somebody lets you down, like the photographer doesn't turn up. So wedding insurance is designed to cover that sort of thing, and that makes it really hard to claim on the policies that even were available before the pandemic. Whether wedding insurance is necessary kind of depends on the kind of day you're having and how expensive it's going to be. If you can kind of rearrange it at fairly little cost, then it might not be worth it for you anyway. But it is good to have that sort of extra protection, especially if you're laying out quite a lot up front. Some of them do cover rescheduling, so a little differences in price that they need to that for you didn't sign up for in the first place, and through no fault of your own, then the insurer will cover you for that. But yeah, at the moment, unfortunately, it's really hard to get anyway.
And is there anything else that a couple could do to protect themselves a little bit? Like you often hear people talking about credit cards and how they can protect you on certain purchases. Um, is that something you would recommend?
Yes, well, whatever you're spending money on, if it costs between £100 and £30,000, paying on a credit card can offer you some really useful legal protection, and that's called Section 75. It basically means that the card provider is jointly liable with the company if something goes wrong. So even if the company won't give you your money back, the card provider should be able to do it for you. And even if something costs under £100, there's something called chargeback, which is actually voluntary. It's not legal like Section 75 is, but it's sort of a guarantee that the bank will try and reverse the payment from the other side and claw it back from the retailer themselves if something goes wrong. So you have those protections. But unfortunately, in the wedding industry, a lot of payments are made by bank transfer, which aren't particularly protected. So I would say that it's really helpful to make sure that you're on top of the terms and conditions of any payment that you need to make. Ask if you can make it by card for that extra safety. Unfortunately, if they don't offer that facility, you'll have to decide if that's something that a risk you can take.
And lastly, are there any other money-saving words of wisdom that you would like to offer to the people at the wedding show today?
Yeah, I have a few. So first of all, if you have debts, I would try and work to repay those first before having something as big and as costly as a wedding day. Like I said earlier, debt is one of the biggest causes of divorce. It really upsets lots of families and ruins lives. So maybe work to repay that before saving for a wedding. But if you are in a position to save and have the big day that you want, here's some sort of top tips from me that I really, really rate. So first of all, tap into your friends' talents. If you've got a great baker in the family, get them to make your wedding cake. It really helps bring the cost down. It's good for them and it's good for you. And it's something nice that they can gift you for your wedding day. Don't shirk away from pre-loved stuff. I've got a really great example of this for myself. So I've had to reschedule my wedding twice now, but because I have had to move it to December next year, it's really hard to get married in church in Advent. So I'm getting married in a church in March anyway. So I thought I'm going to see if there's a pre-loved dress that I can get to sort of cheer me up, a different outfit that I can wear. I managed to get one that had never been altered, never been worn before, that a bride picked up and then decided on something else. Cost me £200, and I got a proper brand wedding dress for that price. So don't shy away from it. Have a look on all the websites, but shop really safely. Make sure you have a communication going with the seller first, and check advice online to see, make sure you don't get scammed. If you do need to borrow, make sure it's planned and budgeted for. Sometimes weddings are very expensive and you can pay it off in a year, but you need the money a bit sooner. Borrowing is not necessarily bad in itself, but just make sure that you've absolutely planned how you're going to pay for that. And if something happens to your job as well, what you're going to do about it then. And then I think the one thing that really will make all of that cost and all of that effort not worth it is if you don't reserve time for you two on the day. It will feel like such a waste of money if you end up spending most of the day talking to other people and you don't have a moment for yourself. So make sure that you plan into your timings some time just to spend you two, have a chat and just take it all in.
That's amazing advice. Thank you so much, Katie, for all of your words of wisdom. I think a lot of people will find them really, really helpful. To anyone that's watching this, remember you can go to moneysavingexpert.com for lots more amazing advice on everything from saving and budgeting to, like good little hacks and tips and tricks for cutting down your expenses. So definitely give it a wee visit, and make sure you visit all of the exhibitors that are on the stands today. Lots of them are doing special offers and things if you book their services today. And remember, we've got some more sessions, so do come back to the main stage later for more chats. Thank you. Bye.